Welcome to Get Your Bell Rung, a pro wrestling podcast. I am your host, KG, and welcoming back is a gentleman I had on a few weeks ago, and Helinskii. Last time we talked, you were talking about you writing back in the day of magazines for WWE, right down in the middle or the beginning of WWE exploding with WrestleMania. We left off with you transitioning to merchandising.
KG, good to see you. Good to be back. Thanks for inviting me back. And yeah, let's get at it.
Yep. So, like I said, we kind of left off where you were transitioning into merchandising. Was this a kind of a demotion? Is this a promotion? What was going on here?
Well, I mean, you could consider it a demotion to a lateral move, one way or another. Going from being a magazine editor to something else, unless they're making me an executive producer, anything is going lower. So, no, but it was a great opportunity because things were taking off, and you can contribute creatively to that end of the business. I mean, the way the merchandise was flying off the shelves and the product placement on TV tapings was incredible and important, and it was a lot of fun. It brought a new set of challenges, and if you're not being challenged in life, why bother?
Right. Now, was this something you actually preferred over writing, being that you were able to have some say-so in creation and stuff like that?
I wouldn't say that. You have to understand something, though, too. For me going into pro wrestling from newspaper journalism, I crossed the line.
Right.
And it was at that time, it was a line of no return. Now, 5 years afterwards, you could transition back. No newspaper editor in their right mind is going to hire a guy who wrote for pro wrestling.
Right.
I mean,
right.
I couldn't get a gig with ESPN when I applied for work there. So, I mean, it was just one of these things. And okay, what do you do? And it's just you just transition. You make the best of it. You learn, and you accept it as a new challenge.
It's funny that you mentioned that. Back then, you couldn't have got a job with ESPN, if you wanted to, if you applied. And now here we are, so many years later, ESPN paying WWE, $1 billion+ just to carry their PLEs. I mean, things have really changed in professional wrestling.
Well, funny how that circle of life challenges. Hey, before we go any further, I wanted a little shout out. I've got some friends of mine watching tonight here, Caden and Cayenne and Mike Ford. How you doing, boys? Thanks so much for joining in on the podcast tonight. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys for joining in. What was your first impression of working in this department compared to your previous role?
It was a lot less chaotic. It had a little bit more structure to it. The focus was on selling and fulfilling, and creating a revenue source in the live shows, the house shows that we were doing, whether it was a small show in Pennsylvania, house show in Pennsylvania, or Madison Square Garden. So, we had to look at. We tried to at least cover the amount of attendance with at least $1 to $2 per head. Right. And if you would do something like that, it was a pretty successful night. Let's say Madison Square Garden was 20,000 fans. You want to, get at least $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 worth of merchandise in the building that night, because it's one shot only, and you want to maximize as much as you can. The trick was, did we have the inventory? And that's where the juggling act, that's where the creativity, and that's where a lot of things changed. So it just, but that was the fun part of it, I mean, it really was. The other fun part of it was when we had product placement at TV tapings. Mm-hmm. And we put product in the first couple of rows all the way around the rings in Allentown and Hamburg. And, Vince would go to a promo and talk about an ad in the magazine. And then people were buying the magazine. Then they were cutting out the ads to buy merchandise. So I mean, it was crazy. It was insane. I mean, Vince was playing on the business of family, and,
Mhm.
which he always has. You know, he made the ticket prices affordable for families, but he also got as much money out of the families as possible.
Right. Well, and let's talk about Vince for a moment, because in our first interview that we did, we talked about, how Vince at times could be difficult to work for. And I mean, rightfully so. This is a man who's trying to build a major company here. He's trying to bring professional wrestling where it's never been before. Once you went from writing, covering stories in the magazines to merchandising, did he become easier to work for? Did he become even more difficult, or it was just Vince McMahon, period?
He was easier to work for because there was a buffer. I
Right.
didn't report directly to him, so there was a buffer. We had a guy named Robert DeBoard, who was the gentleman in charge of the department. So he's the one who had the dealings one-on-one with Vince and Linda. You know, I'm not here to bash Vince McMahon in any way, shape,
Right.
or form. The man was brilliant. He gave me a great opportunity to experience something in my life that people would kill to have that opportunity for. So it just, but Vince was Vince. He was very challenging. He was always forward thinking. That motor was going 20 hours a day, and
Right.
he demanded and expected you to try to match that, even though he wasn't paying you for it. So I mean, and that brought up a whole new different challenge too, where how much can you go, how much can you take, and how much burnout can you deal with?
Right. And that was my next question. Big pay cut from your previous position, the same. Talk to me about that. And how many hours did you work?
It was pretty much about the same amount of money, but I was working less hours. So you had sort of a normal life at that point. Yeah, would we go to Madison Square Garden? Sure, we did that with the magazine. On weekends, would we go to some of the shows like Philadelphia or Boston or Hartford? Yeah, we did that as well too. We also wanted to see what was selling and what were the crowd's reaction and what their buying choices were, depending on who was on the card and who was not on the card. I mean, merch was moving. Of course, when you had somebody on the card in the building, you were selling a lot more. But, anything with Hulk Hogan on it, whether he was on the card or not, that stuff moved, and it moved big.
Now, you mentioned that you had more fun at times in merchandise because of the creative aspect of it. Talk to me about that. Who'd you bring your ideas to? Did you feel like, the creative side with you having ideas, do you feel like that they were welcomed, or did you feel like they kind of nudged you aside with ideas?
Well, when it came to the creative side and the design of a T-shirt, that was handled by the art department. Okay. So, that's right out of your hand. The creativity that we had was, can we get a big order selling and make a big push this month for this particular item? Maybe a Lou Albano T-shirt, which, believe it or not, were very, very successful. And even when Snuka was with us, Jimmy sold a lot of product in Morocco. The Magnificent Morocco T-shirts were. Oh. I mean, we had, and then when Macho Man came on, that was huge as well too. So, bringing this stuff in, and the creativity was making money when these guys weren't on the particular card. And then people were going, oh my God, or you would have a ring announcer that'd make, hey, we've got Mandy Macho Man T-shirts, at the merchandising tables here tonight. And people, you put that power of suggestion in people's minds, mm-hmm. That went a long way. It really, really did.
Right. Talk to me about coordinating with production, marketing, and talent for marketing ideas for the launches. Did you have anything? Was your hands involved in that at all?
No, not really, because the only time we were involved with that was when we anticipated the shipments. We were always, tried to keep abreast on what was happening with TV and if Vince was talking about it, or did we have any mock-ups that were planted in the crowds around the ringside? What type of advertising was going in the program and the monthly magazines? So we could anticipate what we needed to do and what type of manpower we needed in our warehouse facility just to be able to fulfill those orders. And sometimes, because inventory was such a juggling act, sometimes we wouldn't get to merchandising orders to fulfill them in a month, 5 weeks, 6 weeks. Wow. And that's borderline crazy at that point. But we were taking the sure thing with taking care of the venues at that point because people were clamoring for it in the venues and were willing to pay. I mean, our cost of a T-shirt, I think back then was $12. A WrestleMania 3 was, I think, $20. Right. Okay, that's 1983, 85, 86, 87 prices. What is that today? Triple maybe? Okay, so we're talking about 36 to $60 for a T-shirt. Right. Which now everything is in line because everything is relative at that point. But minimum wage at that point was, I think, maybe $3 an hour. But still, even asking for a $12 T-shirt was pretty significant at that point.
Right. Now, I know when you worked for the magazine, when you were writing for the magazine, you had a relationship with a lot of the guys, a lot of the wrestlers, the talents. Did you see kind of some of your relationships kind of fall back to the side because now you're working in merchandise, you're not really involved with the talent as much as you were before?
The talent was always very gracious. I learned in this business, once you're accepted in the fraternity, you're pretty much staying in the fraternity unless you screw it up and you've ruined the relationships. But the guys were always very gracious and would shake hands and ask how things are going and vice versa. So that really didn't change things in any way, shape, or form. The only thing you had to be more careful was you had to keep your mouth shut because you couldn't let on to how well, merchandise sales were going on for a particular item, including, hey, this T-shirt, because that they would use it against you and in a negotiating tool with Vince. Vince was negotiating royalties on merchandise. Couldn't tell you what they were, and I'm sure they weren't the same across the board. So, I was told several times, just keep your mouth shut around the boys when it comes down to merchandise and the merchandise sales.
Now, I have to imagine back then in that era that it was Hulk Hogan's merchandise, regardless of what it was. Was that your number one sales back then?
Oh, without a doubt. That was huge. Anything in red and anything in yellow. I mean, it was flying off the shelves. It didn't matter if it was a foam finger. It didn't matter if it was a Hulk Hogan poster. I mean, we had a life-size Hulk Hogan poster we were selling. I mean, we had a 7-foot poster. I mean, which was insane at that point. Hulk had the wristbands, the headbands at one time. We did that more lost, meaning they tend to get missing. They go missing as opposed to T-shirts and whatnot. T-shirts are hard to stash away and steal. But we went with the other items instead, and anything with Hulk on it, we would sell out quickly. Replenish those T-shirts. For some reason, these T-shirt suppliers were onto us about red and yellow, and boy, the prices were going up on T-shirts at that point. They wanted their cut of the business.
Right. How much are you able to say, or do you even remember how much revenue was Hulk Hogan merchandise bringing in back then?
I can't be accurate with a number, and it would be a poor guess on my part.
Right.
I think overall as a business, say about 86, 87, we were doing, about $5 million in business.
Jesus.
At that point, I mean, you got to understand. Some months we were doing, 50 shows.
Right.
And so 50, 60 shows. So that added up quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, the little house shows, you would be surprised the amount of money that came in.
Well, I can imagine.
Then you got to the mid-level arenas, the Syracuses, the Rochesters, that brought in a significant amount of money. And then when you got to the Garden, Boston, New York, the Spectrum in Philadelphia, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, they were bringing in some big, big money. And then when we got into the Canadian markets and tapping into Toronto and Montreal, that was huge at that point. What we didn't do, and we should have, was set up merchandising operations, a small one in the Canadian cities, because we would have gotten away from all the hassle of trying to take this stuff over the border.
Right. Do you think this is a fair statement to make that you're able to, the people who are first able to see the tides of a wrestler are starting to lose their fanfare is in merchandise, because you start to see their product drop a little bit? Is that a fair statement?
Not sure about that. What I notice, and it's something that Vince told me, TV drove everything. So out of sight, out of mind. If these guys aren't getting a push or have a good angle or becoming a mid card or on big cards, they are preliminaries. They've got one foot out the door at that point. And the fans then pick up on that as well too, that this guy is leaving, and then all of a sudden we're not ordering his product anymore. That is the tip off at that point. Like, okay, right. Things are changing. You have to understand, wrestlers and a lot of WWF employees, we have a shelf life. Hulk was dismissed. A lot of people were dismissed. I was dismissed eventually. That's just the way the nature of the business, and that's how it doesn't mean it's the WWF, but all these other territories as well too.
Right, absolutely.
So, I mean, and so if they're not drawing money, and the the road agents feel that they're either becoming difficult to work with, won't work with people, or they're not getting any response from the fans, then it's time really to send them to another territory and let them get them out of there for a while, and maybe bring them back with a different angle and a different gimmick.
Right. Do you remember a time where you seen the writing on the wall, merchandise wasn't being ordered, sales were down, that you seen that this guy was on the way out the door, but that individual did not know that they were on the way out the door yet?
You know what? I'm probably going to say Jimmy Snuka.
Really?
And I'll tell you the reason why. He got himself in that trouble with his girlfriend. Buddy Rogers was his on-road valet with him to make sure Jimmy was going to making the bookings in the arenas. At which I know Buddy Rogers was not happy in doing this, but it was a payday for him. And that was, Buddy Rogers was his last hurrah with us was babysitting Jimmy Snuka on the road. But I think Snuka always thought he was going to hang on and stay on, and things were going to be good and things were going to change. But we didn't order any more product of Jimmy. And then the old thing, you're not on TV anymore, or you don't know the backstory or the legalities, or if the lawyers were saying, okay, it's time to cut loose this guy. But you could see the writing on the wall, but I don't think Jimmy realized it.
Right. Now, within merchandise, as you said, the talent, they make their cut off of their merchandise that's sold. Was there any times that you or anyone else that worked in merchandise had an issue with any talent because they didn't think that you guys' merchandise was pushing their stuff enough?
No, I don't think that I don't recall any of those issues in any way, shape, or form. They would always poke around and inquire, and hey,
Right.
you guys got a lot of, got plenty of my merchandise, and yeah, we're sending it out. We're putting it out to the shows. Um, I don't know the specific sales on it, and that I wasn't lying when I said that. I mean, it's hard to try to recall all those numbers and be able to spit them out. And better yet, it's probably dangerous to do that, especially if you got to get a couple of drinks in you. You don't
Right.
want to. You don't want to do that. I mean, you want to stay away from that in any way, shape, or form. So,
Right.
we
Now,
we stay clear of that.
you mentioned Buddy Rogers a few minutes ago. Did you know him well?
I met Buddy. He was always gracious, always good to me. Um, did I know him very, very well? No, because he was only there for a short time.
Right. Right. Now, were you still part of WWE when someone's sales, I guess, surpassed Hulk Hogan's for the first time?
No,
No.
no. I was there my time through WrestleMania 3, and a few months after that, I departed in August of '87. So Hulk was still on top.
Right.
You know, clipping on his heels was Piper,
Yep.
and so was Macho Man. And Slaughter at that point had departed the company because he became GI Joe and had his Hasbro deal, and that's where the falling out went between Vince and he, because
Mhm.
Vince signed a deal with LJN, and Slaughter was going to be the first living GI Joe.
Right. Right.
And
And I was going to bring up Sergeant Slaughter next because I know that out of all the talent there, it's pretty fair to say that you and Sergeant Slaughter were probably the closest because you still are really good friends with him, correct?
yeah, I mean, we were just in contact uh, yesterday and Saturday. He's busy on the road with doing different shows and autograph shows, and he's still in a lot of demand. Um, we did with Slaughter in '84. We came out with a campaign, Cobra Corps in '84, and we came out with the Sergeant Slaughter line, T-shirt, duffel bag, dog tags, and we set this is how goofy it was. The pricing was set before we even knew what the products were and what the costs of the products were. And we probably could have lost our shirt. And we were taking these orders, and we had no product in whatsoever for months. I mean, that's how. But the push was, let's got to take advantage of this, and we'll sort through it and figure this thing out later on. And then Slaughter decides he's going to move on. And did the campaign for Cobra Corps in '84 really take off? No.
Right.
No. But I mean, we put the cart way before the horse. That was out of my hands. I remember shaking my head on this. What are we doing?
Well, it's funny. You mentioned how you guys were getting way more orders before you even had the product, right?
Right.
And there's a lot. To me, this shows you how much is behind the machine of WWE, WWF, even at that point, because you have even recently a lot of guys from the business who were taking orders, getting money in for product they did not have yet, and they end up getting in trouble for it. And yet here we are back in the 80s, WWE doing the same thing, basically. Did you guys have to deal with a lot of heated customers because they didn't get their product when they thought that they were going to get it?
I think that we had a customer service department, and I think they got a few nasty phone calls regarding that. I was pretty much insulated away from that because, I had my own thing I had to do and maintain a staff, and make sure everything stayed on point and things got out the door when they needed to get out the door in terms of merchandise to live shows. I mean, we were shipping stuff to, up and down the East Coast at that point, then into the Midwest, and then into the Pacific Northwest. And then we got into how crazy it was air freighting stuff out, because we were cutting it so close and trying to get merchandise in. and we were overpaying at that point because we just didn't have the stuff in, and it became a juggling act. You know, when you commit to inventory, it costs money, and did the company necessarily have that money or want to spend that money? Probably not, or I'm not sure. But if you know, when you look at things and what we were doing, yeah, we were running on a razor thin turnover on merchandise. We really were.
I won't go back to Sergeant Slaughter. One of my childhood heroes. I don't really, you know, I honestly don't know a little boy back in my generation, regardless if he was a wrestling fan or not, who was Sergeant Slaughter wasn't a hero of theirs, just because, you know, yeah, you can say Hulk Hogan went beyond, you know, the wrestling world. Sergeant Slaughter, to me, don't get enough credit for doing it. And in my opinion, in many ways, he did even bigger than Hogan did because of the whole G.I. Joe thing. But there was a time that, you know, Sergeant Slaughter turned heel after this G.I. Joe thing, and it became a pretty big deal. Talk about death threats. I mean, I to this day, I'm honestly shocked that he was able to do this and turn back into a babyface and be accepted, because people back then looked at him as a traitor to the country. Talk to me about your relationship with Slaughter back then and some of the things that he was going through. Did he talk to you about this stuff? I mean, he had to be concerned about his family and stuff like that with the nutbag jobs out there, you know, wanting to kill him.
During that time period, I had lost contact with Slaughter, but catching up with him the last 6 years, he has talked about that, and he has told me about that. When he became an Iraqi sympathizer, he thought it was the best deal turning heel on something like that. Until
on paper, absolutely. I don't mean to interrupt you, but you know, on paper, people have given Sergeant Slaughter shit for that over the years. On paper, when you're talking about business, when you're talking about money, you're talking about success, on paper, how could he not take that?
Oh, absolutely. He had, and that's a chance you took. I mean, you have to understand, when he was going to have the main event with Hogan, that was going to be at the LA Coliseum. And they had to move that because of security concerns. They couldn't secure the place.
Right.
Because the death threats were there so much. His family was getting death threats. His life was miserable for his family at that point. It really, really was. The man was constantly looking over his shoulder because the wrestling fans, there are plenty of nut jobs as well too. I mean, even with he was being a baby face and, you know, dealing with, I know the Iron Sheik, I had to stop a situation in Baltimore one night prior to, because they were going to have a major protest with the Iron Sheik. Yeah. And Linda McMahon hands me this letter from this guy, this nut job, and says, give this guy a call and let's try to settle him down and give him something to stop this protest. I mean, the Sheik Kaz was drawing a lot of heat. I mean, him and Slaughter together, the money that they drew when Slaughter turned babyface. Now, prior to Slaughter becoming babyface, he was a great heel. Mm-hmm. You know, the hardcore Marine Corps veterans loved Slaughter for what he was.
Right.
And, you know, the term of endearment, when you're being called a maggot and a scum and slime, to this day, I mean, the man knew how to get under people's skin. And when he had the Grand Wizard as his manager, and Ernie Roth could get under people's skin, these guys were nuclear hot.
Right.
I mean, and then when they turned Slaughter as a baby face and people went batshit crazy, it was wonderful. And when Slaughter's contract ended in 91, I believe, with G.I. Joe. I mean, he watched the WrestleMania that year and wrote Vince a letter from Cleveland, because he was watching and he was impressed with all the camera angles and that and the production of it. and he wrote Vince a letter saying, "Hey, my contract will be ending. You know, I'd love the opportunity to come back." And about a week later, Vince calls him on the phone. Vince goes, "I knew when your contract was ending with GI Joe. I got an idea for you." And that's where it came into the idea of the Iraqi sympathizer at that point. And when he was asking, you know, who's going to beat Hulk Hogan, and Vince goes, "Well, you probably are," and that's how it went down. And then it changed also too when, correct me if I'm wrong, with the Ultimate Warrior, Slaughter beat him in a match that he wasn't supposed to beat.
I believe you are correct. This was, you know, big wrestling fan, and I remember when I was 16 years old. That's when you really kind of started wanting to date around, you know, date girls. You're that age, and you're going out doing your thing. So for about 2 or 3 years, I completely separated myself from professional wrestling. Just because, you know, fans back then, it's not like what it is today. Fans back then were really looked down upon if you were a fan of professional wrestling back then, right? But I never forget, and this is how I knew it was in the 90s, 18, 19 years old, I turned on professional wrestling for the first time in a couple of years, and that's when I seen Sergeant Slaughter, and he was an actual heel. He was talking bad about the country, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I mean, I was just dumbfounded. I mean, that's how big of a deal that was.
Sure.
Now let me ask you this, and I know the answer in my head that I think you're going to give, but was there ever any type of professional jealousy between Hogan and Slaughter? Because again, in my opinion, and people will say I'm wrong, in my opinion, Slaughter was just as big of a household name as Hulk Hogan. Did you ever hear of any tension back then between the two because of a real life rivalry between the two?
They were very competitive. Slaughter, Hogan, Piper, top three. Yeah. And these guys were, I think Hogan was making 20 grand a week, and Slaughter was 15 grand a week, and Piper, I think it was 12 or maybe even 15,000. This is the type of money that these guys were bringing in. Was there jealousy? I know Slaughter went to Vince saying, "I want to be paid as much as Hogan." Was there necessarily specific jealousy where they disagreed? Maybe in the locker room, could be, not sure. But when it came to the financial aspect, yes, you could call it a jealousy. I like to call it a rivalry.
Right.
But I mean, that's the type of money they were bringing in at that point. I mean, Vince told me he was going to make Hulk Hogan the first $1 million wrestler, and the amount of money that Sarge was drawing with the Iron Sheik, and the USA was just incredible. Sarge became a household name and was hot. I mean, everywhere we went, whether we were doing a photo shoot in Washington D.C. in front of the White House, or taking the Iron Sheik in front of the United Nations, and he's waving that dopey Khomeini flag in front of the United Nations and riling up the whole neighborhood, and buildings are emptying out. Yeah. And I saw that firsthand. And I said, "Oh my God, what this, you know, if I had a camera today, a cell phone camera and a video camera to capture this, it was just unbelievable, some of this stuff." Or when in front of the White House, the Secret Service going about passing us three different different sets of agents walking by. And then the last one stopping and saying, "Mr. Helinskii, how long will you, Sergeant Slaughter, and Mr. Taylor be here?" And this is October of 1983. This is well before the internet, and they had us figured out within 20 minutes who everyone was at that point. And and you think you can do this on a early Sunday morning, and nope.
Yeah, you know I can't believe it, but part of me can't believe it that Sergeant Slaughter wasn't the guy that was on the heels of making either the same or just about the same as Hulk Hogan. Because again, and no disrespect to Roddy Piper, because he was absolutely a legend. He also was a household name in many ways. So was the Ultimate Warrior. But in my opinion, the two guys, especially back then, who had the biggest names again was Hogan and Sergeant Slaughter. And for me, that's based upon how many non-wrestling fans, if you mention Hulk Hogan or Sergeant Slaughter, would say, absolutely, I'm familiar with those guys. So it's a little hard to believe that it wasn't Slaughter the one that was kind of right behind Hogan, make it almost, if not just about the same amount of money as Hogan was.
The funny thing about it, Sarge had a meeting with Vince about money. And Sarge went in there with a lawyer, which Vince hated. I mean,
he did.
He did. And Vince was trying to slough it off, saying, look, I own the trademark on your name. And Slaughter corrected him, said, no. I trademarked myself years ago. You don't own my name. You don't own my name. And Vince went absolutely ballistic about that because he'd been one upped at that point. Right. A few guys were smart enough to trademark their names. A lot of them, no. And once they came on board and they were given a new wrestling name, the WWE, WWF owned it lock, stock, and barrel. And to this day, they still own it lock, stock, and barrel. But Slaughter had the wherewithal years ago to have his name trademarked, and he's been laughing all the way to the bank since then. So, that cost some hard feeling. That's a business thing, and Vince is very competitive in business. I mean, right. I don't think he took it personal, but business-wise, that bothered him. And if you're in his position, I think you're feeling the same way. But Slaughter was brilliant, and especially he knew how to torque Vince coming in with an attorney in that meeting. And Slaughter said, I think you owe me money, Vince. And by and large, they cut him a check. He called, Vince called Jim Barnett, and they cut Slaughter a check.
Yeah. I had his daughter on, Kelly, 6-7 months ago, and she's a class act. And, she talked about some of the difficulties because of him turning heel that the family had to go through. But I want to go way back to the very beginning of you and Sergeant Slaughter's relationship. Tell me that story. How did you guys become such good friends? And why Sergeant Slaughter? Because, I mean, you were surrounded, especially in the days of writing in the magazine, you were surrounded by the who's who. Not saying Sergeant Slaughter is not one of them, he was. But what was it about Sergeant Slaughter that drew you two together?
First of all, we didn't have Hulk Hogan. And Slaughter had turned babyface. And so we were going to, our mission, no pun on words, was to create a magazine. And you had Slaughter with that huge jaw. And if you know Slaughter, he's rather soft-spoken in person, but very understanding of the business, very savvy of the business. And he was the one that gravitated and understood that they're going to put me on TV. I'm going to be on the magazines. This is going to be a big deal. And we just hit it off. He was like an older brother to me. There's things that, we've been through a lot of things together, things that I can't talk about, nor will I ever talk about. But we just had that bond. And when I first caught up with Slaughter 20 years ago, he was on a radio station in Syracuse. and it was 5:30 at night, and I had to go to a 6 o'clock appointment, and I called the radio station and talked my way on the air, and was able to WHEN in Syracuse 620, and I started talking to Slaughter, and I started talking to him in kayfabe. And after about 2 minutes, he goes, "Hi Ed, how you been?" And it's just like, and he was coming to Syracuse for Armed Forces Day at the baseball park, the AAA baseball park, and brought my youngest daughter with me, and met up with Sarge, and Sarge put her in a headlock, and it was just, she was probably 10 years old at the time, and it was the greatest thing at that point. But when I caught up with Slaughter back in 2019, back at the ballpark once again, he was, signing autographs, and I just happened to walk by his table, and the line was maybe 200 deep. People wanting his autograph. And he stopped and he said, "Excuse me, folks, for a moment. I have to say hello to my old friend."
Wow.
So he got up and he gave me this big hug, and he started talking to me things from 1984, like we'd never missed a beat. And I said, "Please stop. I'm going to start crying right now. Don't do this. We can talk later." And he was just wonderful about that. And, it just, we didn't miss a beat. And that's why, and I vowed this time around, my kids are older and that. So we had Sarge in for a wrestling show in Syracuse called WrestleCuse. And I brought my daughter, that daughter from way back when. Now she's got a son, my grandson, and had a significant other. And Slaughter put her in the headlock again, just for old time's sake. It's just like, wow, this is crazy. And of course, my grandson's picking his nose in the photo. So, I mean, it's just like, only my grandkid could get away with picking his nose in front of Sergeant Slaughter. So.
Now, most of the Attitude Era, Sergeant Slaughter was with WWE, not in the role so much so, although he did wrestle a couple of matches every now and then as a wrestler, but more so as the general manager of Raw. I think it was Raw. One thing I have always wondered about that time period was his relationship with the Generation X, Triple H, and Shawn Michaels, who constantly made a mockery of Sergeant Slaughter, of his chin, always made a mockery that when he spoke, he spit a lot. They wear shields over their face. Even though it's a storyline, did Sarge ever mention to you how it kind of went a little too far for him, hurt his feelings? And then the fans' reaction, that is during a period of time where actually I think we're kind of there now once again, to be honest with you, but that was really during a period of time where it was cool to cheer for the heels. So DX were getting cheered for treating a man who's supposed to be an American hero, Sergeant Slaughter, the way they were treating him. Did Sarge ever say that ever hurt his feelings?
No. You have to understand, Sarge was also acting as a road agent at that point, and he was a mentor to a lot of these guys. And he was also one of these guys that could help develop storylines. So he didn't mind. I can almost say he didn't mind at that point. Plus, it was a good payday for him still as well too, and he wasn't taking any bumps really.
Right?
Was he in the uniform anymore? No, he was wearing a suit at that point. So I mean, a different character, even though he had the name Sergeant Slaughter, but he's not wearing the fatigues.
Right.
And not taking the bumps, and he was a mentor. He mentored a lot of the guys back then as well too. I'm trying to think of his name, but he talks about Slaughter as well too, as helping him out in a lot of ways, shape, or form. Sarge was very influential with a lot of the young talent. He was the antithesis to Chief Jay Strongbow. I mean, Strongbow could tear up anybody and find fault in anybody and destroy people's career in a heartbeat. Whereas Slaughter understood that it takes a little bit of time, and maybe we don't have the right storyline or the right angle or the right gimmick for this particular wrestler. But if you've got the talent, let's work on your mic skills, and maybe we can make something out of this.
Right. Going back to you working in merchandise. Was it you that decided that you just wanted to be done? Was it Vince McMahon? Talk to me about the time period where it was time for you to go.
WrestleMania 3 was huge. We did $550,000 worth of merchandise sales that particular show. That was just in Detroit. That wasn't some of the closed circuit arenas that we had. Some of the had some where we had sent some merchandise to. It was a time period in my life. I was engaged. I was going to marry a girl from up here in upstate New York. Did I want to bring her down to Connecticut where she may not see me and my marriage wouldn't possibly last? And if we're going to start a family, how are we going to make it go? Living on the Gold Coast of Connecticut, Stamford, Westport, Greenwich, it's expensive. It was expensive back then. So at that point, I was already talking about, and maybe said it way too many times out loud, that I'm going to give my notice and I'm going to go move back upstate New York. And they did me a favor when we parted company. They really did. They made the decision for me, and that's okay. The final decision. I mean, right. my foot was halfway out the door, but they made sure they got my everything out the door for me this time. And you know what? It may be a little upsetting, but it was the best thing that ever happened. I mean, I can move back up to upstate New York here, go and do something different with my life, and get married, have a family, live in the uncraziness of the East Coast there and the expensive areas. And I mean, back then, my apartment in Stamford, Connecticut, in 1983 was $1,500 a month. Wow. It was a one-bedroom apartment.
Yeah.
And not even in the best part of town. I mean, it was crazy, the pricing at that point. When I lived in Westport, we had the top floor of a house, and that was $900 a month, split between three guys. And then they were charging $900 for the first floor, and then charging $600 for the basement.
Wow.
So I mean, that's the economics of that point. It was best for me to get out, or be let go, or whatever you want to call it, probably for my own good. And I'm okay with that. To this day, I'm okay with that, and I'm grateful for it.
What did you do afterwards?
I got into trucking transportation management. I went to go work for Yellow Freight Systems. I became a general operations manager in Syracuse, New York for about 9 years. Afterwards, I got into companies like Swift Transportation, over the road, spent some time in that. Then I got out of trucking transportation after about 15 years. And then I got into insurance, which was like the biggest mistake in my life to do with that. And I wasted my time and spent 5 years doing that, and then got back into newspapers, but not in the writing sense of it. But then I got in the advertising sense of it and selling. So I was dealing with car dealerships. So I went in my career from professional wrestlers to goofy general managers of auto dealerships. So, I mean, you want to talk about an education at that point.
Yeah.
But I came in with the right credentials, with my background. It's just like, right. Expect the unexpected. I mean, like from professional wrestling. And then right around 2010, I got into radio and radio sales with the group I'm still part-time with. Mm-hmm. And then 11 years ago, they asked if I'd like to cover some broadcasts, high school sports broadcasts, because the guy who was doing it wasn't showing up. No call, right. No show. And I said, geez, I did a little bit of radio back in the WWF. I was Easy Ed on Z100 in New York City for about 6 months. I was doing the WWF wrestling reports from the Garden, Nassau Coliseum, and the Meadowlands. And worked with a guy named Scott Shannon who broke me into it. So I did high school sports on the radio here in upstate New York for 11 years, and pretty much going to be done with that as well too. I mean, this month I'll be 68 years old, and I don't like carrying equipment, 50 pounds of equipment up in 3 flights of stairs into a high school press box. Not my idea of any fun, and then dragging that stuff all the way back down again. Nor in the wintertime do I want to skate across parking lots and in pitch black,
Right.
Give me college facilities with an elevator and a bathroom on the floor, and I'm a good guy, And I can give me some TV, and I'll do some streaming, and life is good.
2 last questions. The first one, I'm sure there's things we haven't even touched on that you could talk about with your years with WWF at the time. Have you thought about writing a book? You're a writer.
No, I won't do it.
Really?
A couple of reasons why. It takes a certain discipline to do it. I don't think I have that discipline anymore. Mm-hmm. Number 2, for me to share stories about some of these guys, a lot of them are deceased. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's fair to them or their surviving families. These guys don't have a way of disputing it, challenging it, maybe not, or disputing it, whatever they want to do. Maybe they want to run an angle and they want to be a heel on me. That's okay too. But I just don't have any interest in doing that. I've appeared in several books. Brad Belugin's book, the one by Keith Elliott Greenberg. There's another guy that interviewed me for a book that's coming out next year. I think John Langmead is his name. We talked earlier this year. He wanted to know about Jim Barnett, which is a whole different podcast about James Barnett, my boy. But a book. Now I'll talk about these guys to a certain extent on these podcasts, but you know what? It just, I was invited into this fraternity. I think it's sacred, and I don't want to do anything to hurt anybody just to make a buck. It's not in my DNA to do it. Am I a writer? Yeah. Could I do it? Yeah. Do I want to do it? No.
Fair enough. To close this out, is there a story about you and Sergeant Slaughter that obviously you feel comfortable sharing that would entertain all of the fans? A good wholesome story about you and Sergeant Slaughter.
The Washington, D.C. one was a good one. Part of that was where, not just the White House, but we went to Steve Taylor, myself, and Sarge, driving around in my 1979 Chevy Malibu, no air conditioning, lime green, plastic seats. We decided we're going to go to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, which, fine. It's very solemn if you've ever been there.
Right.
But we had some goofballs there yelling Cobra Corps in '84, USA, USA, chanting there. I said, "Oh boy, let's do what we got to do, wrap this up, and get out of here." And then we decide we'll go to the statue of Iwo Jima, and Sergeant, Steve Taylor poses Sarge right in front where he's holding the flag, and it's a famous shot in the magazine, and that worked out well. So we said, okay, where else can we go here in Washington? And I says, I saw this sign we're driving around. It says to Pentagon. Hey, let's take a ride here. It's Sunday morning. Let's go up to the Pentagon. You know that? And I think I went in the wrong way where it's a one-way out, and I went in.
Right.
And we go up, and I've got maybe a quarter of a mile up the ramp. And here's 3 cars side by side coming at me. And I says, this is not looking good, guys. So, I don't try to race it. I just pretend I'm making a U-turn like I'm lost and going slowly down the ramp. And they pull me over. And a couple of MPs come to the driver's side door, hand on the holster, state your business. I'm sorry, I made a wrong turn into here. We're with World Wrestling Federation. We have Sergeant Slaughter in the back here. We're doing a photo shoot here in Washington. You can't make this story up. I mean, you really can't. So MPs look in the back and they go, oh my God, it is Sergeant Slaughter. And Slaughter's deadpanned, doesn't break character. He goes, at ease, man. I've got this handled. And instead of getting in trouble, we get an escort out of the Pentagon.
Wow.
And I got Taylor next to me in the front seat and Slaughter in the back. And I said, boys, this is really goddamn funny, but we don't crack a smile until we're out of here and onto a city street. And we roared. Like, you can't make this stuff up with something like that would happen. I mean, and Slaughter still talks about that, when we run across one another. Slaughter has a unique way of bringing up stories just out of the blue. Something from 40 years ago. He can remember like it was yesterday. Wow. And he just looks at me. He just looks at me with that big smile. And I said, you're just amazing. The stuff that you can remember in a heartbeat. And, he is just phenomenal. A phenomenal talent, a phenomenal person. And I'm glad he's my best friend in the business. He really is. I mean, my big brother, and I just get very emotional about him. I mean, he's meant a lot to me and my family.
Right. Well, I tell you what, Ed, man, thank you for coming on, not just once, but twice. And I tell you, just like last time, the first time I interviewed you, I maybe asked 2 questions off of my 50 questions I have for you. I got 3 off of my page. I love the conversation that I have with you. It's organic. It's genuine. Thank you for opening up about Sergeant Slaughter, talking about your friendship. I really, really appreciate it. Man, you are always welcome on this podcast. Love your state of New York. My wife and I, as you know, we traveled the East Coast, and we were planning on possibly leaving Minnesota and moving next year when my youngest is 18, when he goes off to college. And New York has never been on my list. New York is now on my list of places of possibly moving to because it's just so damn beautiful out in that direction. Lake Placid, all of those areas, man, just breathtaking.
You didn't even hit the Finger Lakes, which is a whole great opportunity as well to come by next summer, man. We'll go down to the People's Republic of Ithaca or Watkins Glen and Geneva, Seneca Falls. I mean, this is, absolutely. And even Auburn here. I mean, we've got a lot of things going on here. We really do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's keep in touch. I think I'm going to take you up on that offer because if you don't leave Minnesota, we're going to just start traveling a lot more than we already have. Stay on the road for 3-4 weeks at a time. So, again, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure talking to you, Ed.
I want to congratulate you on your weight loss, man. That is tremendous. You know, always remember, round is a shape when you're getting into shape. Don't ever forget that.
I've been very fortunate throughout my life. I've always been able to just gain weight and then drop it whenever I want to. I figured this would be harder now that I'm 53 years old, and man, I swear, it's like I know what to do. All I have to do is start walking. And as soon as I start walking, it just falls off of me.
You're just a young pup. You know that?
Yeah, I don't feel like it. 53 years old, man.
I don't feel like an old dog. You're not there yet. You know that?
Oh, thank you so much, guys. On Wednesday, we have Mr. Herb Simmons, SICW. That's Mayor Herb Simmons. Owner of SICW, a gentleman who is very involved in the Cauliflower Alley Club, which I am as well. But he's going to be on at 6 p.m. Central. We're actually going to be talking about this past year, the 59th reunion that happened in Vegas. It was a great time. We're going to be talking about that and so much more. So please subscribe to my YouTube channel so you guys can catch my interview with Mr. Herb Simmons. Until then, you guys have a great week. Mr. Ed, thank you so much again, sir, for coming on.
Peace.